I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. This summer, the state released more than $20 million for 16 projects intended to increase swimming access across the state, bringing New York's commitment to Governor Kathy Hochul's NY Swims initiative to nearly $260 million for 79 projects in every corner of the Empire State, which is touted as the biggest public swimming infrastructure investment since the New Deal. For more on the distribution of dollars, we're joined in the studio by Robert Rodriguez, President and CEO of the State Dormitory Authority, which is the financing arm for billions of dollars of state priorities. Welcome back to the show, President Rodriguez.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So this spending is supposed to primarily address gaps in swimming infrastructure, particularly in communities that can't foot the bill, or at least a large portion of the bill themselves. So can you talk about what has been getting funded and how sites have been identified to date?
Sure. This is part of the governor's Unplugged and Play initiative, which is really focusing on reconnecting communities. And the way that we do that is by investing in public infrastructure. And as a reminder that swimming pools are public infrastructure. They provide not just a place for kids to learn to swim. So it's not just a life-saving kind of location, but it's a place where families connect and where communities get to build relationships as well. So investing in this community infrastructure is one of the ways that the governor is trying to get people back into their communities. We'll talk about Bricks another time, which focuses on our community centers and our playgrounds through our Plays initiative. But through these tools, kind of the three legs of the stool, we're able to really invest in community public infrastructure. So to your point, how are we choosing these communities? And it's really about making sure that we can invest in communities that are historically and typically underserved, that do not have access to adequate swimming facilities, and in many instances haven't had access to a pool for maybe over a decade. So part of that is making sure that, one, the community has the infrastructure that we can, or doesn't have the infrastructure to make sure that we make that investment. This is a capital program, so it does require some local investment. So there's a matching program. We're in for 80%. The locality has to be in for at least 20%.
Pretty good deal.
Yep, a great deal. And ultimately, it has to be a financially viable project, and usually it's through that match that we're able to get there. So it's a competitive program. It's important to mention that, is that, we put out a proposal to receive in applications. This is our second round of swims. As you mentioned, our first round was about a year ago, and that's when we first talked about the program and some of the grants that were happening. And we're now at a point where some of those projects are done, where we are now opening aquatic centers, and we have now moved on to our second round, which is that $21 million that you referenced there. So some of the folks around this area in the capital region, particularly Lincoln Park and Albany, are probably enjoying their pool this summer, as well as Newburgh and Knickerbocker in Troy. So those are three examples of pools that we were able to open through our initial rounds of swims that are now online. And now we have work happening across the state, of course, in Mid-Hudson, North Country, and Western New York. So a lot of work happening.
Has this led to the creation of brand new pools, or is it primarily restoring facilities that were in need of an update? And how do you choose which you're going to prioritize when you're evaluating proposals?
Yeah, I think we've done both. And I think like in the instance of Troy Knickerbocker, brand new pool, brand new facility, and in many other instances, it's a renovation of existing ones, an expansion, and really making it more accessible and bringing them back to life. So it's really a combination of both of them, and I think the criteria really focuses on what's the community need? Is it underserved? Is there no other available facilities? What's the public benefit? How ready is this project? Can we be in the ground? And financial viability. Those are kind of the main pillars of how we make that decision. And then, of course, we look for regional distribution, making sure that we're able to create these facilities all across the state, and that every community has some access to it. So it's important for us to recognize that if there's no swimming facilities in a 10-mile radius, then that's probably where we need to put a pool. So thinking about things holistically in that way is important as well.
How do you evaluate some of the municipal proposals versus proposals that come from nonprofits, say, which might have a membership fee that might preclude people from accessing them, or maybe they're geared towards certain populations as opposed to the municipality more broadly?
Well, I think that's been an important part of the journey. When our first round of swims was focused on municipalities, our second wave of awards were for not-for-profits, and I think part of that is making sure that we have both of those pools, excuse the pun, available, for both of those different areas. So I think we've done both of those, and I think it's important for us to recognize that investments are not just going to be done by one and the owner. When we talk about our community infrastructure, sometimes the nonprofit already has that infrastructure, making it a little bit easier from a readiness component to invest in that versus a brand new facility. But there are, obviously, we look at both of those and we want to make sure that both of those avenues of funding have been made available through the SWIMS program. So there's some flagship programs that we have. I think the governor spoke a little bit about Jones Beach and the work that's happening there. And we know that there's an aquatic center in Schenectady that's being explored through SUNY. So there's a number of flagship programs, but really we recognize that the projects are big and small. It doesn't always need to be a brand new, shiny new facility. Sometimes the one in the Y, is just as good and gets as much access as anywhere else, and needs that investment to continue.
Well, we're talking about capital dollars, but one of the reasons that some pools have limited access is because of municipal operating strain. And I think about here in the capital region, there were pools where people were like, well, why isn't this one open already? It's been 70 plus degrees, but there might be financial constraints that mean they don't have the staffing to open up, or maybe they haven't been able to pay for the maintenance to keep these things running. So is that something that you are considering as part of these competitive grants, the ability of municipalities to fund the day-to-day operations? Is that some sort of commitment that you're looking for from municipalities on these?
Yes, typically in terms of the applications, is looking at financial viability, not just from the 20% match component, but also that it's a long-term commitment to make sure that this public asset that we're investing in is something that you're responsible for upkeeping, into the next generation. So I think, that's part of that conversation, to make sure that they understand that yes, we want the pool open, and making sure that it's open to the public, that you're actually serving the residents and making it accessible to them, which includes making sure that you have it staffed, making sure that you perform the maintenance that's necessary to do that. So it is very much built into the application when we look at project readiness and financial viability.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and I'm David Lombardo, and we're speaking with Robert Rodriguez, President and CEO of the State Dormitory Authority. So as part of this investment in traditional pool infrastructure, the governor has also prioritized a floating pool proposed for the East River off of Pier 35 in New York City. Is the pilot program happening there this summer as planned, or what's the status of that right now?
Well, the Plus Pools, we call it the Plus Pools, continues to move ahead. I think it's one of those extraordinarily challenging engineering feats in terms of trying to figure out how to build this pool and create the level of filtration and build it and, frankly, move it where it needs to go. So
Sure.
it's certainly a project that continues to be advanced. But it won't be ready this summer, to say the least.
But you guys are doing the initial pilot this summer as planned? Is that still happening?
I think the construction continues to work on that. I'll get back to you on the timeline specifically, but definitely there's continued progress on the Plus Pools concept.
And what about the nature of funding this initiative? Because as we talked about, the traditional pool projects have been funded through a competitive matching grant program, whereas my impression of this was, hey, somebody's got this great idea to potentially make swimming available in the East River if you're not crazy, or if you're not concerned about your health. Is this something that was competitively funded as well, or is this a unique project that kind of got special treatment?
Yeah, I would say this was a unique project, and I think the purpose is to be able to make both competitive and discretionary decisions at different points. And I think this was definitely something that could be scaled for different locations if we get it right. And if this is an opportunity for us to try to innovate in partnership with a nonprofit to see if this is something that works and could actually be something that is unique to New York and could provide a greater economic development / tourism related angle to our investment. So I think for us, this is something that could be a unique project, and which is why we're undertaking it and moving ahead with it. But recognizing that pilot programs are not going to meet the vast need that we have to provide swimming facilities for the vast majority of New Yorkers, hence the SWIMS program and the $260 million that we're investing across the state.
Well, moving forward, is there additional untapped but appropriated money that you can use for New York Swims, or are you going to have to get additional appropriation authority in future budgets to go beyond that $260 million for 79 projects?
Oh, I think we're looking forward to next year's budget. The $21 million that we mentioned was appropriated as part of this past budget, so we were able to meet the significant demand that we had in terms of our second rounds of swims. So we're excited that we continue to do that, and I think we'll have to see what next year holds for us in terms of the future appropriations. But I think we've proven the concept. The governor put this out there as something that we recognize that we needed, and the communities have followed through in terms of their consistent applications to reinvigorate these really important public infrastructure projects around swimming. So I think we should continue to think about how do we meet that demand? How do we make sure that every New Yorker can learn to swim, can have a place to recreate with their family and their friends, and recognize that there's still some communities that we haven't gotten to, and we should continue to look at that until we're done.
You mentioned the evolution of the funding from round one to round two, for example, including nonprofits. So for future rounds of funding, assuming the legislature blesses you with additional appropriation authority, are you anticipating doing anything differently? For example, would you continue to do the competitive matching, or would you look for more flexibility? Are there other things that you would want to do differently or more of in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, it's continuing to do the match. I think that's important to show the local support and commitment around that, and then also making sure that we continue to have the right balance of municipalities and nonprofits. So I think having the distinct rounds allowed us to target specifically investments in those specific communities. But I think now, as we are becoming a little bit more mature in terms of the grant program, being able to designate certain amounts for each community, I think is probably the way to go moving forward.
You mentioned the viability of these individual projects, and there's also the personnel to run them, and there's a well-noticed shortage of lifeguards for a couple of years now. The governor has prioritized filling those spots. New York City has tried to shine a spotlight on that. How persistent of a problem does that remain as we talk in summer of 2026? I
think getting people into lifeguard positions continues to remain an issue. We certainly have heard that at different times from my colleagues over in the Parks Department and what they do. So I think that is something that we have to continue to work towards funding and supporting. And I think that's one of the things that we have seen maybe not as intensely in places like New York City and some of the larger areas, where partnerships with some of the nonprofits have really met the need for lifeguards. For example, some of the partnerships with the YMCAs and the Boys and Girls Clubs, they have been able to help with respect to staffing some of those lifeguard opportunities that exist in partnership with municipalities. So we have seen that collaboration between the nonprofit community and the municipal community to be able to staff the pools is something that is one way that they've been able to deal with that crisis in certain communities.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation. We've been speaking with Robert Rodriguez. He's the president and CEO for the Dormitory Authority of the state of New York. President Rodriguez, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.